It's engaging, informative,
top-notch.
Talk that I like,
Top-notch.
politics I like.
That's how you gotta roll.
I've never been so disturbed and so excited.
This is the Unforced Turnovers Podcast, talking sports, society, and life in general. Here's your host, Ray Palma.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever one of those applies to your current situation, and welcome to the first ever, the inaugural, the initial, the pilot episode of the Unforced Turnovers Podcast. Dare I call it the flagship episode, not to be confused with Flagship Brewery. Shout out Flagship Brewery, Staten Island, New York. And welcome to the first ever Unforced Turnovers Podcast. I'm your host, Ray Palma, alongside my co-host, Wu-Tang. Wu-Tang is my dog. He's a 13-pound Shih Tzu. He may or may not chime in throughout the broadcast, but mostly he's a silent partner in this whole operation. Briefly about me, I'm a New York City educator, 41 years old. I'm single. I'm a high school hoops coach. I own my own home. I'm a sports fanatic, as you're going to see throughout the show. The show was supposed to start a few weeks back. Our season came to an end at New York High School in Staten Island, New York, basketball-wise, and I was looking for something to do and something that would interest me. And a few people had mentioned to me that podcasting, that with all my views and thoughts to share with the world, that perhaps it would be something I'd be interested in doing. And so I went out, bought the equipment, and a few weeks ago, had it kind of set up to where I was learning GarageBand. You know, shout out Karan McKenzie for a big assist coming over and giving me a help with this. Or Mickey Staten, I believe, would be the more production name. But either way, you know, a big shout out to him, and some people came along to help me out. But that was a few weeks ago. I get to get things started, and then boom. This whole pandemic hit, and the coronavirus and all this real life stuff took effect. So I put this on the back burner for a little while. And then after doing my online learning grades a little while ago, I realized, you know, I have a lot of free time in my hands, and I can't go outside, and I can't go to the golf course, and I can't go be with my friends, and I can't go for a beer at the bar. I can't do anything. So therefore, I found myself thinking, hey, you know, this would be a really good time to get the podcast going. So here I am bringing the podcast back. Now, the show's going to cover a variety of topics. Definitely mostly nonsense and mostly sports. When I say nonsense, you're going to hear everything from, I'm going to get some people on here to talk about the Staten Island Ferry, some of their commutes, some of their war stories. We're going to talk about high school sports at some, not as much high school as pro though. We're going to talk about sports in general, NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA. Not so much me, but boxing too. Boxing's not my expertise, but I will bring in other people that follow a little more than I do to give their views, okay? May even go horse racing. You'll probably never hear hockey, but that's okay. Hockey's not my thing, so I don't expect to hear much hockey on here. But for the most part, nonsense, social stuff, sports, fun things. Nothing too serious. Not going to hear any religion. You barely hear any politics, although I can't promise that because as we get close to election time, who knows? And who knows how the show may evolve. I do believe, you know, big in evolution, and you know, as a coach, a 22-year-old Ray Palmer would laugh at 41-year-old Ray Palmer, the way he handles things, and you know, some of the things he clamps down on, whereas others he lets go. So if you don't evolve as a coach, you're a poor coach, and if you don't evolve as a podcast host, I would imagine you're not doing a good job as a podcast host. So we'll see. But as of right now, you can expect just total nonsense on a weekly basis, weekly, bi-weekly, however we decide to do it. Haven't really figured that part out just yet. But we will continue to provide nonsense topics, fun things, or just my opinions or other people's opinions on certain topics, largely around sports and nonsense, as we're trying to call it here. But today's show is just me solo. It was going to be me by myself because this is what I wanted to get off my chest first before the pandemic. Now the pandemic is just making it much easier for me to do the show by myself, or actually forcing me to do so. The lone topic for today is none other than New York Knicks owner Jim Dolan. Jim Dolan is quite the lightning rod in New York City. He's owned the team for quite some time. He's owned Madison Square Garden, Knicks and the Rangers since May of 1997. 97 of May, he takes over the team, or his father takes over the team, and hands much of the responsibility to him to run ball, and eventually hands over all of the responsibility of running the entire operation to one of his many children. let's just go over the last 20 years in particular. So it's 2020. So from around 2000 on, after the 99 finals, 99 we go to the finals, 8 seed, Jeff Van Gundy, Van Gundy's grabbing Zoe's leg, all types of things happening. Just a great, great time in Knicks history. But for the last 20 years, we've had 12 head coaches. We've had 17 presidents or general managers or whatever term you want to use for the person in charge of the organization. And we've been to the playoffs 5 times. We've had one winning playoff series, one 50-game winning or more winning season, and only 3 seasons. This is what scares me the most. 3 of the coaches had seasons above 500. And that would be Van Gundy, D'Antoni, and Mike Woodson. A few years back, Mike Woodson was the last team to have any success. The Knicks went to the second round of the playoffs. I believe it was 2013. Could be off on the year, but they went to the playoffs. Won 54 games with Mike Woodson, with Carmelo Anthony carrying the team as an MVP caliber talent. And I think he finished third in the MVP voting that season. It's funny how Melo gets a lot of bashing from Knicks fans, and there might be an episode about Carmelo Anthony in the future because I happen to be, while I'm pro Melo, definitely. I do admit to his flaws too. I'm a Carmelo Anthony supporter, but I do have my reservations. He could take some of the blame for a lot of what happened here in New York, but all of the blame and the blame he gets, no, it's unwarranted completely. Look back at the last time we were relevant people. No one remembers the year that Carmelo Anthony was the MVP candidate, 54 games, things like that. But that's for another time. That was also the last time we were any good, and that was quite some time ago, to say the least. So before we get into Dolan and dig into all of his negatives, let's focus on perhaps not a lot of positives, but certainly some positives that should be pointed out. If you're going to do a biopic or I don't know what you call this, a podcast optic or a bitch session or a yapping session or just some fat guy in his house talking about a guy's a millionaire owner session. I don't know what you're going to call it, but nonetheless, he has done some positive things. One, and it's not a positive, but he's a recovering alcoholic and he's vocal about it. As someone who knows many people that deal with addiction issues and have problems like that, the fact that he's vocal about it, verbal, and lets people know about his recovery, is willing to help others, things like that, that's pretty freaking cool. I give him that. Madison Square Garden. Madison Square Garden is my favorite place in the world. And a venue I would go to any chance I got for any type of an event. Just I love Madison Square Garden, always have. Knicks games when I was younger. Even other events, Harlem Globetrotters, my dad would take us, the circus, things like that. But for the most part, the Garden was falling apart about 10 to 15 years ago before Dolan decided other people would try and get money from the state or try and do various other things. And you know what? He put up the money. He got $1 billion together, of private funds to renovate the Garden. Not million, billion. $1 billion with a B. That's an awful lot of money put in it renovated. It was much needed. You can see the Garden now. It looks a lot better. The Chase Bridge. I think the Chase Bridge is a crappy seat. It's too far away in my view. But other people disagree with me. So aesthetically, it's very pleasing. It looks very nice. It's fun to look at. And something that, makes the Garden way better. Beyond the obvious renovations it needed, just more bathrooms, more modern technologies, bars, restaurants, the play-by-play lounge, different areas, just making it more accessible, more enjoyable for other people, phone charging stations. It needed a major renovation, and Dolan did a really good job updating and renovating from that perspective. From a business perspective, he's very successful. I mean, he owns Radio City Music Hall, the Chicago Theater, the Beacon Theater, among others. He just sold the Forum in Los Angeles. He sold the Forum for $400 million to Steve Ballmer, the owner of the Los Angeles Clippers. During this pandemic and while the NBA is not being played, he's out there making a cool $400 million while selling something. There's former Knick Tyson Chandler. Tyson Chandler was on the Knicks, and his mother was dying of cancer. I shouldn't say dying of cancer. I'm unaware of the whole story. But she was sick with cancer and going through a battle. And Dolan offered use of his own private jet, free of charge, back and forth, coast to coast. His mother lived in Los Angeles. But anytime Tyson Chandler wanted it, it was there for him. Tyson Chandler's on record giving a high endorsement of Mr. Dolan. So, kudos to that and credit to him for that, because certainly that's something that goes above and beyond what's necessary and what has to be done. So kudos to him for that, like I said. And he did a lot of the several things. He opened the Garden of Dreams Foundation. The Garden of Dreams Foundation is a fundraiser they do yearly at MSG. Celebrities come in. It's like a Jerry Lewis telethon. They raffle off a lot of items. and they make hundreds of thousands of dollars for kids in need and various charities, things like that. A very nice thing. Does a lot of good things for people. Builds homes. It branches out a lot of different directions. Again, back to the business. He sold Cablevision to a company called Altice. I could be pronouncing that wrong. ALTIC for $17.7 billion. And then weeks later, watch the stock for Cablevision drop dramatically. 17.7 billion with a B. I guess when you sell things for 17.7 billion, putting 1 billion back into Madison Square Garden to renovate is not that difficult. He's donated to countless causes. I remember Carmelo Anthony's fundraiser for Puerto Rico after all the destruction in Puerto Rico. He's been known to provide college funds for various team employees, family members, and kids, and donates to many, many causes. So he's definitely not cheap when it comes to donating. He attends a Christmas Day event every year at the Garden. He's known to have perfect attendance. Every year shows up, serves food for the less fortunate, to the homeless, things like that. He once missed a Rangers playoff game. He was at an AA meeting, and they had a speech going, or he was talking, and he just said he felt he couldn't leave because they were having an important discussion. And he missed a Rangers playoff game for it. Goes to show how serious he is about his own recovery, or maybe helping others, or both. But just to stay there and stay in an AA meeting as opposed to going to a playoff game shows his commitment to his recovery and to others. A story about Glenn Sather. Again, I don't know anything about hockey, but from what I'm told, Glenn Sather is the guy running the New York Rangers. At one point, they were struggling, and Dolan gave Sather his 10-year sobriety chip. In Alcoholics Anonymous recovery, they give you chips for each milestone. I'm not sure how many there are, but I know 1-year chip, 2-year chip, 5-year chips, 10-year chips, things like that. And he gave his to Sather kind of as a way to say, I have faith in you. And he wrote it out, and then the Rangers were rewarded. I mean, the Rangers have had a lot of success and done certainly a lot better than the Knicks have as an organization over the years. And the last positive I'll say for Dolan is that he spends money. You read about other teams, and they have salary cap constraints, and they're trying to get under the luxury tax, and they're trying to do this or that. We never have that problem with Jimmy Dolan. I'll give him that. The man spends money like it's nothing. And of course, it is nothing to him, quite frankly. But Dolan would never be worried about anything like that. You'll hear about the salaries he's paid people. Gave Larry Brown $28 million to go away. One season, $28 million to coach a crappy team. He's somebody who, again, if he could just hire the right person and stay out of the way and just not communicate with people at all, he'd be great. But he refuses to do that. Because financially speaking, you can't get a better owner in sports. I mean, he's willing to spend. If the Knicks were good, if the Knicks were in contention, and we had a trade in front of us that would add a significant amount of money to our luxury tax, but we could get him, Dolan would push the button in a second. Whereas a lot of other teams, due to luxury tax purposes, they're forced to not be able to pay it, like the Houston Rockets. The Houston Rockets are a great example. 2 legendary players in Harden and Westbrook, but they're forced to cut corners in other areas because the owner doesn't want to pay luxury tax. Now, I'm not a luxury tax expert, but I can explain it in very basic terms. Above a certain level of payment, above a certain level of team salary, let's say if it goes over $200 million, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but actually, no, the exact number is around $145 million, I believe. So let's say that for every dollar over the luxury tax, you have to pay back in tax penalties. The longer you're in the luxury tax, the more you have to pay. The Knicks were paying luxury tax for quite some time because all the other years, the Isaiah Thomas years, Eddie Curry, things like that. But now we're in a very good cap situation. But whether we're in a good cap situation, a bad cap situation, or anything in between, Dolan will spend the money. And that is something that it can't be looked down upon. I just wish he would be able to spend the money and just sit quietly and stop bothering people. But he doesn't seem capable of doing that, so we'll have to just give up. I don't know what else to tell you. So we're going to move on, and we're going to go over the career of James Dolan. We're going to go over many of the things he's done, many of these coaches. We're actually going to go through all of his coaches, all of his general managers, and going to read a lot of different stuff and go over a lot of different things. But first, we're going to take what's called a quick Zudu break. Quick Zudu break coming up.
As I roll up on the tunnel, I'ma drop my tints. I know them feds is trying to stop my sprints across the tri-state, but why fake its greatness? Y'all dudes just hate cause you irate, you ain't this. So take this, one off a size. Clientele ran out, so re-up supplies. They be like, who them guys with diatribes that sell? Escaping from the place where the high-rise fell. Your man try and flex cause he thinks I stole her. Little does she know that she's just a loner. Although I play the role, yo, it's just a boner. When I'm done, she's going home. home to a rightful owner. My slow flow, remark to D. Spit awfully as we spark the chi. Pardon me, we took a journey across the sands of time. Before my body hit the gurney, yo, the land is mine. Zoodoo! Just give me one for the money and two for the bass. Three is for the honeys that love to give face.
Shout out to my guy Mark D and the quick little song there, probably from the late 90s, early 2000s, just to break up the monotony a little bit of some talking. So back to the important stuff like Jamie Dolan. I said it by accident, but I'm going to stick with it because a unisex name makes more sense for somebody like you, James Dolan. Jim Dolan Sr. elected to put him in charge of Cablevision, which is pretty funny because he had several other kids, and the other kids that were much more successful business-wise, that didn't have the background he did. They weren't recovering alcoholics. As a matter of fact, when he took over, he was 1 year sober. So a year sober got him a multi-million, eventually multi-billion-dollar corporation. When they asked Jim Dolan Sr., we asked him why he gave it to James, he said basically because nobody else wanted it. And that was the first statement I shouldn't say a statement, but that type of logic is what built the giant child that we have in James Dolan. It built the person that we have running the Knicks. He's a giant, oversized, spoiled, rich kid child who treats the Knicks like one of his toys, as opposed to the organization that so many people like myself, and I would imagine the people listening, know to love. So let's go over some more of his lovely things. Negatives, that would be. His lovely negatives. His negatives. One, his media policy. He has a policy with his staff that they can't talk to people. They record all conversations. He tries to eliminate people from the media. He picks fights with every possible media source there is over the years. Banned the Daily News for so many years. For so many years, the Post was the only place to get Knicks coverage because Dolan banned pretty much every reporter the Daily News had to offer. I remember him once, Glenn Grunwald, former general manager, and actually one of the few successful general managers under his tenure. Glenn Grunwald, he cut him off mid-interview and told Grunwald and the reporter that the meeting was not cleared by his people and cut him off immediately. Larry Brown, we'll get into Larry Brown and my disdain for Larry Brown, but Larry Brown once pulled over on the side of the road and had a press conference, per se, on the side of a road because he couldn't get away from the Madison Square Garden security people. And Dolan's maniacs just trying to keep him in line. It's insane. Sprewell one time walked out of a workshop. He got into some trouble with Dolan for walking out of a workshop regarding the media policy and how he's supposed to talk to the media. This is a guy coming up choking his coach. If anyone knows how to talk to a media, it's Sprewell. And Sprewell was fantastic with the media as a player in pretty much every aspect of the world as far as, when with the Knicks, Sprewell was great. But media policies, telling him how to talk, no, he didn't enjoy it. To have a meeting, and they got him in some trouble with Dolan. These are just some of the many examples. He once fired the great Marv Albert. Now listen, he fired Marv Albert, he fired Marv Albert for when he got in trouble with some, it wasn't quite rape, it was some kind of sexual misconduct. I remember him biting females' asses and things like that. I don't know the whole story, but actually look that up. He's wearing lingerie, I believe. Might be a good Google search for you if you're bored during this pandemic and want to kill some time. But he fired him for that, then rehired him years later, but then fired him again because he was critical of the team. Then the team stunk. He made honest comments. He is the public address announcer, not public address announcer, but the lead broadcaster for the game. It's his job to talk about the game. He can't just make things up because Dolan's a very sensitive, large, spoiled, rich kid child. But unfortunately, that's what happened. So Marv Albert fired after being rehired despite sexual allegations, which is funny because it seems to be a trend with this jackass because he did the same thing with Isaiah Thomas. We had the Garden and Isaiah Thomas and Dolan all combined for about $12 million in losses after the Anika Brown lawsuit was settled. Isaiah Thomas being a large portion of many of the issues that occurred and was the culprit for a lot of the allegations that were made prior to the settlement. He then brings Isaiah back years later to run the Liberty. He brings a guy who was brought up on charges for sexual harassment back to run a female basketball team. I mean, you can't make this up. It's like fake. It's almost like, how can we make up a story that no one would ever believe? How can we write a movie where the owner, the bad guy, is so bad and so rich and so dumb and such a child and basically such a I don't know. I don't know how you can make a script that Hollywood would buy. But if you wrote a script with the New York Knicks, that would certainly do it. People walk around on eggshells around him. Arguments with fans, oh, forget about it. He's throwing people out of the building for saying sell the team. He takes away free speech. Like, what celebrity can't handle sell the team? Not a cursing out, not an undressing, not where it crosses any kind of a line. No one threw anything at him. No one did anything like that. A fan told him to sell the team, and he had security remove him. And that's one of many instances where this has occurred. He's his quote, "You want to come to any more games? Well, you better enjoy watching on TV," before he threw a guy out. I mean, literally, threw him out of the garden for it. Here's what other organizations running you 5 tickets for $25, you get 4 hot dogs and 10 sodas and all this other stuff, begging for people to come to games. Trae Young's a phenomenal player. They're begging people to go to watch Hawks games. Meanwhile, the Knicks sell out, up until recently, Knicks sell out almost every night. And he's throwing fans out to watch a team. To watch matter of fact, not a team, a terrible basketball team. I mean, that's a horrible basketball team. Since the Carmelo Anthony team, where he was the MVP in 2013, this team has been nothing short of abysmal. And this guy is throwing fans out of the freaking building. How could you possibly freaking do that? Last quote I'll give him. Quote, "I think the Knicks fans are burdened by its history. Everyone is still waiting for Dave DeBusschere to come back." What? You old geriatric, big, ugly, fat, freaking face, stupid want to tell me that I'm waiting for Dave fucking DeBusschere? No, I never saw 41 years old and see fucking DeBusschere play. Do you know what population of the audience was around for DeBusschere? Not a lot of them. Probably no one listened to this fucking podcast, that's for sure. Are you serious? We're waiting for DeBusschere, that's the answer? No, we're waiting for an ownership who's not going to make free agents want to go somewhere else. We're waiting for you to go, guy. You're told to sell the team everywhere you go because nobody can stand your punk, rich, selfish ass. But that's just what it is. You're a punk, you're rich, you're selfish. So all that adds up. Actually, punk's the wrong word because I don't know you personally, so to call you a punk is probably not accurate. But you are a and you do suck. You do, in fact, suck, sir. And if there was a God and you were someone listening to this, feel free to get in touch with me anytime. Ray Palmer, SINY@gmail.com. Anytime you want to have a conversation, I'll be happy to do this in person, homie. This isn't this is no Twitter fingers going on over here either. Okay. Bottom line, guy's a clown. Guy's a clown. Think about Dave DeBusschere. That's what we're doing. That's where your brain is. You think we're waiting for Dave DeBusschere? Man, I'll settle for Charlie Ward. Give me the second coming of Charlie Ward. Give me a point guard in the building. We'll start there. Not to mention the bad luck, too, like not winning the lottery, all these things, losing all the games, getting the third pick when there were two studs in that draft and we picked third. You know, the breaks haven't gone our way either. But the number one denominator, the number one reason for all of our failures over the last 20-plus years is you, Jimmy Dolan. And no, I don't want Dave DeBusschere. We want stars. We'd like LeBron's, please. Had a chance at him twice. But he didn't even give us an interview because, quite frankly, no one wants to work for you. After how you handled Melo and that whole situation, after pretty much how you've handled anything, you're just a freaking clown. You know what, buddy? The world will be a better place when you're no longer in charge of the New York Knicks. And God, I can't keep thinking about it. DeBusschere. That's what we're waiting for. Anyway. Moving along to coaches. Only 2 coaches since 1995 have had 3 full seasons. 1995. Let's take a little hop in the DeLorean, get to 88 miles an hour and go back in time to 1995. Let's say it's my senior year. Well, depending on what time of year it was. Let's go my junior year of high school. Matt Curtis, enjoying life, hoping to get better at basketball, and I loved playing basketball at that time in life. Hanging out with some good friends, had a really good life. I've been very blessed, and I will always be grateful for that. When I think about 95, the only thing that comes to mind is how long ago it was. Since 1995, 3 seasons. Now, I've been a high school basketball coach for 20 consecutive seasons across 4 schools. So I've left schools 3 times and landed a head coaching job the very next season. And I've always done at least 3 at every stop along the way. Curtis was my shortest stint, 3 years Curtis JV coach. So I've done 3 at every stop over 20 years. Over the last 25 years of Jimmy Dolan, 2 coaches have lasted 3 full seasons. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know how to even, I don't know. If you're wondering, the 2 coaches are Jeff Van Gundy and who the other one? D'Antoni. D'Antoni and Van Gundy would be the ones that lasted longer. But let's go with, let's just go with the start of the list. So after Riley leaves, the team's really good. A lot of great things happen. But after Riley leaves, the Knicks decided to go with a big name hire, which at the time I was so ecstatic about, man. But they brought in Don Nelson. Now, Don Nelson came along and he had some odd thoughts. His style of play did not match the Knicks. He had publicly thought about and talked about playing Patrick Ewing, from the wing and things like that. And with Ewing being one of the best low post players to ever play this game, to try and change his game seemed odd. But hey, listen, we're willing to give a Hall of Famer like Don Nelson his opportunities. Now, hopefully, there's at least my friends anyway listening to this podcast and are saying, yeah, Don Nelson, he sucks as a Knicks coach. And I thought that too until I did some research for the show. And you know what Don Nelson's record was when he left? I don't think fire is the right word to use. I think it was a mutual parting of ways there. They were 34-25. I would cut my pinky off with a hot butter knife for Knicks to be 34-25 right now. And back then, we were so good, and coming off of the Pat Riley years, there's no one I hate more in this world than Pat Riley. Pat Riley, you're a Benedict Arnold who quit by fax machine in the middle of the night. I can't stand Pat Riley. I can't stand anything Miami Heat. You, Pat Riley. There'll be another podcast about you one day. But on the other side of it, you're the best coach outside of JVG that we've had. And what you brought to the Knicks was measurable. You brought your style, you brought winning, you brought a culture. You brought a culture and it just felt great. The black sneakers in the playoffs, everything you did to bring the Knicks to where they were a long time ago and to make my childhood a happy one as far as basketball goes, I want to thank you for. But besides that, the way you left us and the way you quit and the way you just gave up on the organization because you wanted to be in charge. I think you wanted to be the GM and the coach, which back then was quite, not done nearly as much as it's done now. It's not that you quit because, hey, listen, you want to move to Miami and get some warm weather, I don't blame you. But you did it in the middle of the night by fax. Screw you, bro. F*** off, Pat Riley. You can take Pat Riley and Coach K. You can go hop in a boat somewhere and just take off and keep floating away so you can leave all of civilization alone. Throw Floyd Mayweather in that boat with you. It's going to be Pat Riley, Coach K, Floyd Mayweather. Put him on a boat, have the boat take off, never be seen by anyone in civilization again. I think the world would be a better place. But getting back, Pat Riley definitely gets under my skin. Now, Don Nelson not only gave us 34-25 record, but he also led us to my favorite coach in the history of sport. I withdraw in history of sports. I got to recognize the great Bill Parcells and Tom Coughlin, Joe Torre. So it's hard to compare who's better amongst those guys, at least amongst my favorite coaches of my teams. But Don Nelson was let go, 69 games into the season. 59 games into the season. And we brought along my favorite coach of all time, the infamous JVG, Jeff Van Gundy. Jeff Van Gundy, career record of 248 and 172, 37-32 in the playoffs. 37-32 in the playoffs means we played 30s, doing quick math, 60 to 69. 69 playoff games, okay? And he's the opposite of Pat Riley. He didn't have any shortcuts. He wasn't a former player for Kentucky and a former Knick that had an opportunity to do different things and find his way back, find an easy path to coaching. Nothing was given to him. He was, as a matter of fact, while this was going on, because Van Gundy took over midseason and then had the team by himself the following year. During the playoffs, Phil Jackson was being openly recruited by none other than Jim Dolan. So Jim Dolan had this coach in Jeff Van Gundy who was nothing but a great success and was out recruiting somebody else. He was looking to replace a guy who had just done so much for the team and had this team playing on all cylinders. It just goes to show the kind of person that Phil Jackson is, the kind of person that Jimmy Dolan is, and just another example of how Jim Dolan has no idea how to appreciate what he has. No idea to appreciate. When Jeff Van Gundy took the job, in his press conference, it was famous, he held up his watch. He said, "I'm not Pat Riley. Do you see my watch? $8." He said like a little geek, and he drove a Honda Civic, and not a Honda, like a nice hooked up Honda Civic. He drove an old beat up Honda Civic. Patrick Ewing was in the back nine of his career. We traded for Sprewell, who's one of my top 5 Knicks ever, but traded for Sprewell when we had Houston, so it's like 2 guys playing the same position. Had to make Charles Oakley work alongside Ewing, which is sometimes tough with Oakley's inability to play offense, certainly from a under the basket perspective. Oakley did develop the nice jump shot towards the end of his career, but everything. I'm just Jeff Van Gundy, man. Grabbing Alonzo Mourning's legs, slugging Diet Cokes. My favorite coach ever, the notorious JVG for life, man. And you know what Van Gundy did too, along with Riley started it, was, back then people wanted to come to the Knicks. They wanted to play for Van Gundy. And I guess Jimmy Dolan hadn't done anything too stupid yet to the point where he was swaying people from coming here. Remember, Allen Houston was the number 1 free agent. Don't quote me on that. Maybe not the number 1, but one of the top free agents that season. And had many other options, including going back to the Pistons. Allen Houston chose to become a New York Knick. And not many people do that. Not Charlie Ward, but Chris Childs as well. Both signed, big-time free agent deals. Then they traded for Sprewell, and magic happened. Take it down to Miami when I'm in Delaware, visiting my good friend Jill Neer and down in Delaware College. And we had a fun night, went out, enjoyed ourselves. And then I remember not sleeping the night before. You want to know why? Because the game was at 12 o'clock. And back in those days, sleep was... sleeping in the afternoon was an option through the night. And I was afraid I'd miss it. So I stayed up all night just so I wouldn't miss the game. And sure, it was worth it. And Allen Houston ran out the buzzer, sent us into everything, and then sent us into the finals. And the NBA finals, it's underrated the job Van Gundy did there in those finals. If you remember, Ewing tore his Achilles in the second round. So we have no Patrick Ewing. We have Chris Dudley jumping ball. Chris Dudley's the starting center. In the 99 finals, he's jumping ball versus David Robinson. Chris Dudley. Love Chris Dudley, man. Shout out Chris Dudley. If there's any way you're listening, Chris Dudley, you're the freaking man. But you're not a starting NBA finals starting center. And that's what we did, and we were competitive. Okay, listen, not so much in the finals. Spurs are a better team. But I do remember that game 3 at the Garden, man. Oh, Sprewell. Sprewell was amazing. I'm just ranting and thinking back. Going a little long. I have a little pace in front of me here, how I want to get to certain topics, but Van Gundy's getting a little long-winded. You want to know why? Because Jeff Van Gundy's the man. Jeff Van Gundy's the best coach for the Knicks in my lifetime, and I should really pray that this time in the coaching search, bring Jeff Van Gundy back. Let JVG run the show. Let's get back to a team that defends the pick and roll. Let's get back to a team that doesn't switch all freaking screens. Let's be selective. Let's have some freaking schemes. Let's get back to basketball the way it's supposed to be played here in New York City. Let's go back and bring the guy who went 248 and 172. Let's get the guy who has 248 wins as the Knicks head coach. Bring him back. Jeff Van Gundy. All right, moving along. So, Jeff Van Gundy elects to leave. Again, no one knows the whole story for sure, but it wasn't fired. Van Gundy decided to leave on his own, and we come and bring in Don Chaney. And this is the first coach with a losing record during the era. Prior to that, Riley had done so well. Nelson, a winning coach, Van Gundy, a winning coach. So, but this was a rough time, a crappy roster. I mean, you can't blame Don Chaney much. Really, no team's going to win if you have Shandon Anderson, Howard Isley, and Clarence Weatherspoon making millions signed to big term contracts. Shandon Anderson, we traded for his contract. Howard Isley, we traded for it. Clarence Weatherspoon, we gave him a big contract. Just really bad teams. 72 and 112 for Don Chaney. So Don Chaney, first losing record, someone who, seemed like a good man, but, maybe overmatched as a head coach. And like I said, not really given much of a chance. So when they move to Don Chaney's, when you see the downfall, like how bad things could be. The Don Chaney years weren't as bad as they are now, but it was on a similar path. And before we keep going here, we're going about a half hour now. We're going to get another quick Zudu break. Quick Zudu break coming on up.
Yo, we dropped this hot shit. Word to Britney cause we toxic and lock this. Y'all can't stop it after greatness cause mediocrity. That's why no other rapper will ever blow the spot with me. My words resonate high above with a sparrow fly and penetrate your bone deep inside where your marrow lies. These narrow guys need to get more rounded. Cooking that beat, spitting out the raw sound. Kid, so think twice before you try stopping us. Zudu Records in our prime like Optimus. About to transform this whole rap game. Smack lanes, rack brains out for that Shaq fame. You know what to track, man. Oh shit, reverse it. Check the bar to see how hard my verse it. Cause I swear to God, yo, we living in trouble. Got heroes sick and dying just for working on the rubble. So pardon my laughter, it's drowning my sorrow. Every moment that passed you is one you can't borrow. So live it now. So live it now.
Breaking my guy. I'm not sure he wants his name mentioned publicly, so I'm not going to go with that. But you know who you are. Legendary MC, great friend of mine, doing great things down there in another state. So, moving on. So Don Chaney, obviously, Don Chaney did the best he could, but it wasn't much going on. Then, mid-season, the Knicks did something that most teams don't do. Usually, if you fire the coach mid-season, you bring in somebody who from the bench or from one of the coaches on staff to finish the year, and then you go outside the organization. The Knicks went outside the organization and decided to bring in not just any coach, but the legendary Lenny Wilkens. Lenny Wilkens, top 5 all-time in wins and top 5 all-times in losses. Also a phenomenal player during his playing days. So a good get for the team. Took over mid-season and got the team into the playoffs. So they fired Chaney, and Lenny Wilkens came aboard and did a fantastic job. Brought the team in the contention, brought the team into the playoffs. Following year wasn't quite as good. Got to a poor start. People questioned, he was older at the time. Maybe he wasn't quite able to relate to the players as much. But nonetheless, Lenny Wilkens, 40 and 41, 81 games as Knicks coach. Hall of Famer, class act, kind of like a blip on the radar, I guess, as far as Knicks tenure. But certainly, at 40 and 41, that's more wins than Don Nelson, more wins than Lenny Wilkens. More wins than Larry Brown. More wins than Derek Fisher, more wins than Kurt Rambis, more wins than David Fizdale. So certainly, and that's only in 81 games. So not the worst Knicks coach ever, but not someone that was given much of a chance from both a talent standpoint and obviously having to deal with working for Jimmy Dolan. So after that, they bring in Herb Williams to take over for Lenny Wilkens. Herb went a total of 17 and 27 in 2 stints as an interim coach. Herb Williams, great guy, one of my favorite players to watch as Ewing's backup years ago. But, better off being an assistant coach, not really a head coach. I believe he now is an assistant coach with the Liberty, actually. So he remains as an assistant coach. But, being a head coach probably wasn't for Herb Williams, despite being a great guy. So after, Jeff Van Gundy, great success. Then Don Chaney, Lenny Wilkens, Herb Williams, moderate success. The success I would take nowadays. You give me a 40 and 41 record these days, I'd be the happiest person in Staten Island. But then we go out, and Isaiah Thomas aims big and prize the great Larry Brown, or they should say at the time, the great Larry Brown away from the Detroit Pistons. Larry Brown coached that Detroit Pistons team, just one of the best teams of the last 25 years, and they don't get a lot of respect. But that starting unit, with Richard Hamilton at off guard and Chauncey Billups, and then Tayshaun Prince with his length, Rasheed Wallace, one of my favorite basketball players ever, and then Ben Wallace, the defensive mastermind. That was quite the team. They had youth off the bench. They were quite the team, and Larry Brown went real far with them. Won a championship, did some unprecedented things. Larry Brown, again, proven track record of a winner in college, just a winner, period. Larry Brown, the one thing you knew, or I shouldn't say knew, but expected upon the hiring of Larry Brown was that, you know who you're hiring. You know you're hiring a guy who's maniacal and kind of a control freak, and you have to expect that. But instead, Isaiah Thomas thought that he was going to be the general manager. Dolan thought he'd be the owner, and that a guy like Larry Brown would come in and just do whatever they wanted him to do. And it just wasn't going to work. I mentioned the media policy before. From day one, they had a major issue with Larry Brown, the media policy, not being able to speak freely. Larry Brown's a New Yorker. He just wants a chance to talk to the media. One of the few people that wasn't afraid to at least talk to the media. I give him that credit. And the team, listen, the team had talent. The team had a lot of talent. Jamal Crawford, Stephon Marbury, Quentin Richardson, Nate Robinson, Trevor Ariza, a young Eddie Curry just before he's really fat and before he fell out of shape. Remember Eddie Curry was once a 19-9 guy in the league. I actually had season tickets that season. So they had talent. But the bottom line is Larry Brown showed up and acted like a jackass the entire time he was here. He came here and demanded things. He was unreasonable with Isaiah Thomas. Larry Brown, man. Now, Larry Brown really gets under my skin because I really truly thought that with the talent we had, that Larry Brown could make it work. And a good coach makes it work. A good coach, I'm not a system coach. Elliot Wilson and I have been doing this a long time, 20 years. And, if you name the team, there's different offenses based on talent. If we had a bunch of big guys, you best believe we're going to throw the ball into the post. The last few seasons, I haven't had a big guy to throw the ball into, so we haven't played in the post at all. It's just a matter of adjustment. Well, that's what you think someone like Larry Brown would do, because Larry Brown also has held teams that played slow, had teams that played a little faster. But no, none of that. Larry Brown just wanted his big fat paycheck. And that's what he got, a big fat paycheck. He was a big name hire. He's a jackass who acts like he invented the game. And then he demanded we trade for Steve Francis. On a basketball team already consisting of Stephon Marbury and Jamal Crawford, he demanded or implored or went above Isaiah Thomas straight to Dolan to get the team to trade for Steve Francis. Then he trades to Steve Francis. The Knicks traded to acquire Steve Francis, which was cool. I mean, Steve Francis is a tremendous talent in his day, but it was a terrible fit. And then he didn't play him. He wouldn't play Steve Francis. Clearly Larry Brown had lost his freaking mind. And, Larry Brown, man. That's all I really got to say. Years later, he got the job at SMU, and a kid I coached once went there, and a kid I had a miserable experience and transferred out. I'm not going to use the kid's name. I don't know if he wants that mentioned. But you know what? A kid I know went there. He didn't like Larry Brown either. I shouldn't say I didn't speak to him about it personally. I didn't ask him Larry Brown questions because I knew I couldn't handle the conversation. I wasn't going to be an adult enough about it. But I can assume that he didn't like Larry Brown. The Knicks didn't like Larry Brown. And the Larry Brown hiring was one big disaster. Larry Brown, wherever you are, you can go kick rocks somewhere, or you can get on that boat with Pat Riley and those guys if you want to. All right. So we get through the worst year, arguably the worst year in team history. I know there were worse years for wins and losses, but just the nonsense that was Larry Brown. 23-59 in his illustrious Knick tenure, Larry Brown. So 23-59. So then, what Jimmy Dolan did was he said, you know what? You need to go coach the team to Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah Thomas is actually, we'll get into the general manager Isaiah Thomas later. So we'll just talk about Coach Isaiah Thomas. He's the worst coach in Knicks history. I should say Knicks history in my lifetime. We'll say since '95, just basically my adult life. The worst coach. I had season tickets, went to a lot of games despite the fact that we were awful. Just watched the team not compete. With Fizdale, with Jeff Hornacek. Not with Fisher, but Fizdale with Hornacek, and certainly even with Mike Miller now. The team plays hard. They stink, but they play hard though. Under Isaiah Thomas during that year and a half, 2 years, the 56-108 for Isaiah Thomas. Again, 56-108 was his record with the Knicks. The team didn't play hard. The team didn't compete. Just simply put, the low point for me in the organization's history. And the worst Knicks coach of all time was Isaiah Thomas. It's a shame because he was such a fantastic point guard. Had the smile, had everything that and that could turn New York around, and he didn't because he's a jackass. So the other one, you, Isaiah Thomas, you selfish prick. And the way you coached that team and what you did or lack thereof just tells me something along the lines of that you don't belong as the coach of the New York Knicks. And there's a reason you haven't gotten any jobs in coaching since, because you blew the entire thing up. Again, go kick rocks. So then came a gust of happiness, a moment where, you know what, this could work. And the Knicks brought in Mike D'Antoni. Mike D'Antoni comes in after Isaiah Thomas, and the mood changes. I had read his book, 7 Seconds or Less. Every basketball coach wants to play. That's a little hint, right? Listen when you watch a coach get hired, any coaching job. The coach's first answer is going to say, well, we want to get up and down the floor, and we want to rebound. It's the generic answer, we want to get up and down the floor. There's coaches that say we want to get down the floor and don't know what they're doing, and there's coaches who actually institute offense, defense, schemes that will make teams get up and down the floor. Will encourage running, will force running, which is, hey, listen, a great way to play basketball. I'm not mocking getting up and down the floor. Most coaches, guys sound like it's just easy. Like, yeah, we want to run up and down and make baskets. It's not quite that simple, although it's not that much more complicated either. Believe me, there's a reason I coach basketball, mostly because it's very easy. But he came in, had a great reputation from his years with the Suns, won a lot of games. The team had signed Amari Stoudemire. They went to the playoffs in the second season. A lot of good things happened. It started off weird because he was the guy that benched Marbury. You can make arguments either way, but you know what? And I like D'Antoni, but Stephon Marbury on the bench, Chris Duhon in the game, you can't tell me that. It was then, it's now. I'm actually turning red thinking about how ridiculous it was, because you could not like Marbury, but undeniably he had an offensive skill set far superior to that of Chris Duhon. And Chris Duhon couldn't guard nobody either. Chris Duhon is a terrible basketball player who had no business ever really playing in the NBA. I believe he went to the Magic after us and then was soon out of the league, which proved my point even further. A very, very odd scenario that he drew the line in the same with Marbury. But who knows? I'm blaming Dolan. There's nothing written about that. That's out of my own brain. But I'm blaming Dolan. I think Dolan had that idea. I think Jimmy's bright idea was to have that done. And, bottom line is that it was a move he made, a decision he made, and it was weird. The first year with D'Antoni wasn't great, but the team wasn't very good. Like I said, Amari Stoudemire came along, and we had a lot of fun with that Amari Stoudemire team. Not a great team, weren't going to win championships. They were fun to watch. And then all hell broke loose. We traded half the team for Carmelo Anthony against, I believe, Dolan's wishes, against Walsh's wishes. We'll talk about GMs. I'll say that for later. But long story short, get Carmelo Anthony, not a good fit in the system. Came down to Carmelo Anthony or the coach, and the Knicks decided to keep Carmelo, get rid of the coach. And after 4 seasons, 121 and 167, Mike D'Antoni was let go. So you let go of the big name coach. You let go of the guy D'Antoni, the one we hired, the one we gave pretty good money to, and you bring in a Mike Woodson. Not expecting much. How could you expect much from a guy who didn't improve much as a head coach? And the second most successful and my second favorite Knicks coach of this era, Mike Woodson, 109 and 79. I've talked about it a few times, only because it's the only positive I can talk about. 54 wins, second round of the playoffs. With Jason Kidd, Raymond Felton. Basketball was back in New York for that period of time. We didn't go all the way, and we didn't even go to a conference final, so people forget about that year, but it was a really cool year. Just fun to watch. Great basketball. The team played unselfish. Melo played very unselfish. I get no credit for that, but I assure you, as someone who actually watches the games and doesn't get his opinion from other people, I'm not told my opinion. I don't watch Sports Center and think, this is what happened. No, I actually watch games, and that's actually the only people I enjoy talking sports with are those that watch games. I don't like hearing other people's opinions regurgitated. I don't like hearing Mike Francesa's opinions on something and people passing it off as their own. I like original thought. And, the entire time with Mike Woodson, it was just, long story short, it was just a great time. Just somewhere, a feeling here in the city that brought basketball back to where it belonged. And it was just too short. And it was too short for one reason and one reason only. We went away from Grunwald, again, we'll talk GMs later, and we brought in Big Chief Triangle Phil Jackson. And Phil Jackson resulted in the head coach of Derek Fisher. So Mike Woodson, 109 and 79. My quick math, 30 games over 500, decides to leave, and they bring in Derek Fisher, who's a part of the whole package with Phil Jackson. Now, from this point on, this is why the other coaches I'll do a little quicker. From all reports, Phil was hands off. Dolan was hands off. Phil was not tampered with. Phil could make any move that he decided to make for the most part. And for what I understand, the same thing's gone for pretty much all the coaches, since this point. But they bring in Derek Fisher, comes in despite Mike Woodson's success, completely scraps, tries to bring in Phil Jackson's triangle offense, which I'm a fan of, but he tried to bring in the offense. It simply did not work, and the team never brought in. If you're going to, as someone who's done this before, if you're going to institute a new offense, they have to buy in. But years ago, we had a very good team over at CSI McCown, and we won a lot of games, did some very good things, unprecedented things here on Staten Island. And towards the end of the year, we started playing some zone. I mean, just a little bit, just a token zone, just to change things up. We were a man-to-man team, and the kids wouldn't do it. They refused. And I had two choices: to draw a line in the sand and make them run suicides until they did, or just let them have this one and play man-to-man. I'm glad I did it, and it led us on a nice run. But the triangle was forced upon him. No one brought in. It just seemed that this guy just had more of a desire to bang Matt Barnes' wife than did to be the coach. Missed parts of training camp dealing with Matt Barnes' wife nonsense. Awful. I mean, the one trend that in my opinion, I watch games. I'm not just getting my opinions from Sports Center. All the coaches, up until Mike Miller, I like Mike Miller and his substitution patterns. All of them, they just substitute so odd. You can't explain to me how a guy doesn't play in the first half but plays in the second half. except for foul troubles and things like that. But guys play like 4-minute spurts, 3-minute spurts, playing 11, 12 guys. Like, I don't do that with a high school team. Why are we doing this with multimillionaires? I don't get it. And among many things, Derek Fisher just not good with anything. Not good with the media, not a good coach. Team didn't buy in. Awful experience with Derek Fisher. 40-96 over his time with the Knicks. And after we fired Fisher, they brought in Kurt Rambis. What a freaking joke. Kurt Rambis, 9-19. Not wasting my precious breaths. Who knows this freaking virus? I don't know how many breaths I have left. I don't have the virus, by the way. I'm just saying, with the virus going around and who knows what could happen down the road. I'm not going to spend my life talking about Kurt Rambis. Kurt Rambis may be a nice guy, but no business being the head coach of the New York Knicks. But Phil Jackson stays on and makes another hire and brings in Jeff Hornacek, which made many Knicks fans like myself really happy and excited because Jeff Hornacek won Coach of the Year coaching the Phoenix Suns. We have a habit of hiring old Suns coaches, by the way, in case you didn't notice. But bring in Jeff Hornacek, and we thought he wouldn't have to run the triangle, but instead he was forced to run the triangle. Phil came down, instituted himself, went down to practice, got involved in the team. Jeff Hornacek and Phil Jackson weren't previously acquainted. During the coaching search, we all thought that Phil would hire someone from his coaching tree, like a Ron Harper or maybe bring in Kurt Rambis. Kurt Rambis full-time was thought about as part of the option. There's a lot of any one of those former Bulls or former Lakers were all kids. Rick Fox's name was thrown around there. A lot of guys were, I remember Steve Kerr was the candidate before Fisher. I bet you Steve Kerr made the right choice, huh? But nonetheless, Jeff Hornacek, again, substitution patterns. But he was just never really had a chance. It wasn't really Hornacek's fault. If you can't run your own offense, you can't coach a team the way you want. Just one big disaster. So Jeff Hornacek, 60-104 in his 2 seasons, and we moved on from him. Then here's one I was right about. I said it was a bad hire from the beginning, and anyone that knows me knows this because I'm very vocal and on my social media as far as that kind of stuff goes. David Fizdale. I didn't want David Fizdale. My sole reasoning was that I don't want anybody who picks a fight with his best player. And he got into a public spat with Pau Gasol that was in public and it was documented. And it basically became the reason he got fired in Memphis. I don't care who you are. You can't pick fights with your best players, at least not publicly. It's just, and also while better with the media and the team did compete for him, he just made wild substitutions. Didn't seem to have really run anything of any semblance of an offense. We switched all screens. It was just so terrible defensively. Real nice guy, well-dressed, hot wife, but otherwise, Fizdale, go kick rocks. Glad you're gone. Mike Miller, listen to the coach now. If we resume the season, you'll finish the season out. Sounds like a good guy, great man. The team definitely plays better defensively. But I don't think he's the leader of men the Knicks are going to need to get out of this situation we've had as far as no success for quite some time here. So not sure how he would do that. But bottom line is Mike Miller, good man, good coach, maybe having a job as an assistant coach down the road. But whoever the next coach of the Knicks is, I sincerely doubt it would be Mike Miller. Next up, we'll get into the GMs. But first, before I get into the GMs and the presidents, quick Zudu break coming on up.
We're sitting this window for Planet GP. Yo, the older I get, the dumber these kids is getting. Summer's ended and y'all going back to prison. Zudu's a mission, them lines are in no position. Old syringes, hey, this is a flow, so listen. It's Rick Vicious, back with the new edition. Leave Bobby home, no. I smoke a bone, though. You're picking up these words like it's money on the phone, yo. Kobe's testimony, a phony. We the pros, bro.
Lyrically, I rape you anytime I have a chance to. The flow I know is sicker than AIDS patients with cancer. Tupac Thug Immortal went to school to be a dancer. Saying I got questions, ain't no rapper wanna answer.
Hope you enjoyed our quick Zudu break, and I hope you enjoyed the breakdown of the coaches. But now we're going to get into the general managers, or the presidents, or basically the people that were in charge of the Knicks. So before James Dolan took over, Jim Dolan and other people hired Dave Checketts. Dave Checketts was in charge of the Garden from 91 to 99. Dave Checketts was, easily the best executive in my lifetime. The main reason for our 90 success, he built the 93-94 team, and a lot of the pieces of the 99 team were still there when they went to the finals run. Listen, he signed Pat Riley. He brought in the biggest possible name coach. He signed Patrick Ewing to a contract extension when many thought that Ewing might look to leave New York. Brought in Allen Houston, Latrell Sprewell. Simply put, Dave Checkett, great general manager and great team president. I wanted to mention him because he's not included on this list. Like he's before. I mean, he was still there for the last 2 years, but he only worked 2 years for James Dolan. And I don't have any inside information. One of the best because he didn't want to deal with him. So he left them, and after a couple of years aside, he would pursue a better opportunity somewhere else. So, but the first hire, as far as under the James Dolan regime, is one of the biggest disgraces, in my opinion, in the hiring of any coach, and that would be general manager, and that would be Scott Layden. What a freaking joke from the very start. I mean, the names this guy brought with him: Clarence Weatherspoon, Howard Isley, Shandon Anderson. The three of them on awful contracts. Awful, 40, 50, 60, 70 million dollars. Clarence Weatherspoon was a fat, undersized power forward. Shandon Anderson might be the worst basketball player I've ever seen. At least I played for the Knicks. Other than playing hard, I couldn't think of an attribute that man had. Howard Isley was like a slow, Howard Isley would have shined in the 1920s, I'm sure, with his style of play, with his slow game and just general lack of basketball ability. Layden looked like a nerd, just didn't play the part. The hiring made no sense. This is nepotism at its finest, though. His father was a famous owner and general manager, and I believe a coach with the Jazz. So he decided that people think because the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Well, hey, we're the Jazz. I don't think the Jazz are a picture of any kind of consistency that we want. And nonetheless, Scott Layden, a gigantic mess. But I can tell a good story of my trip to Utah. Elliot Wilson and I coached Lawrence Bora, LB, here at McKee Staten Island Tech many years ago. And we flew out to Utah. He would play for University of Utah. We flew out to watch his senior night game, to watch his last game there. And actually the coach of the team was Jim Boylan, who's now running the Chicago Bulls, the head coach. And Boylan couldn't be nice to us. Say film sessions and practices and, everything. It was all access pass. It was really neat, really cool. Learned a lot from Coach Boylan. Shout out to Jimmy Boylan, man. Great coach. Shout out to my guy, LB. If not the GOAT here on Staten Island, certainly in that GOAT conversation. My guy. Anyway, flew out to Utah, went to see Lawrence play, but the night before I went to go watch the Jazz play. And at this time, years later, and the assistant coach for the Jazz is none other than Scott Layden. So this is me, a little bit younger. I may have gotten some liquid courage, maybe some Budweiser muscles flowing through my veins. But let me tell you, I wouldn't be able to do this nowadays because I'm older, but I let him have it. I let it all out. I let Scott Layden know in no uncertain terms for, I'd say, about 3/4. We eventually changed seats, and there were a few things that day. But and the people around me were going, why do you keep harassing that man? But you know what? We sat close. He could hear me. I know he could hear me. He never acknowledged me. I'll give him that. But he looked slumped over. He looked defeated. Guess the loser that Scott Layden is. One of the worst general managers in Knicks history. I can't get over how bad those teams were. I'm so happy that I got that out of my system that day, I should say. And letting him have it was one of the most rewarding feelings of my very shallow, very basic life. Scott Layden, joke. One of the worst tenures you could ever imagine, and a total and complete good riddance. Just when you think it couldn't get worse, they get rid of Layden, and again they go not the Hollywood route, but the more big name route, and they bring in Isaiah Thomas, one of my favorite basketball players of all time. And you see a lot of things on social media where you build teams, and you have to, you get $15 to spend, then you get $5 guys, $4 guys, and you see like Isaiah Thomas is one of the $2 guys. He's like, get the I'm taking Isaiah Thomas. Okay, Isaiah Thomas, one of the best point guards to ever play this game. And if we're going to be fair, he's also maybe the best, not maybe, one of the best drafters out there. I mean, his list just goes on and on. I'm blanking at the moment. Nate Robinson, Channing Frye, Wilson Chandler, Trevor Ariza, and then in Toronto it was McGrady, Stoudemire, and Camby. All Isaiah Thomas. So he can recognize talent. He'd probably be a phenomenal scout, or if there's a position, just run the draft kind of guy. But something happens when he talks to people. And I know coaches like this. I know basketball guys who are really good X's and O's and know their stuff, but can't talk to kids. I'm starting to wonder if I'm one of them. But Isaiah Thomas might be that. Maybe he just can't talk to human beings because he certainly knows how to recognize talent. But if, like, we'll say like this, if the Layden regime started the demise of the New York Knicks, Isaiah Thomas put the nail in the coffin. It was a funeral in Madison Square Garden. Like I said, I had season tickets at this time. I still went to games. At this point, when you buy season tickets, especially at that age, actually a true story, I screwed this up, as a matter of fact. I didn't make the payments towards the end. One of my buddies got screwed because I was an idiot, and I just thought, I don't make the payment, how are they going to cancel the tickets? Yeah, they did, actually. But nonetheless, story for another day. Went to these games and just watched a miserable team just not compete. Whether it was Isaiah Thomas as the general manager or Isaiah Thomas as the coach. We're talking about the general manager now, so we'll just stick to that side of it. But, Jerome James, big money contract. So he signed Jerome James, gave him a ton of money when Jerome James had one really strong playoff series the previous season. That's really all he did. And he gave him $30 million over 5 years. Gave him $30 million for a big, tall, fat guy. And then you would think you learn your lesson. But instead of, after we moved on from Jerome, I think he got a buyout. After moving on from Jerome James, then he goes against Eddie Curry. Now, listen, I at the time was very happy, and I'll be honest, the 1 year I did have season tickets, Eddie Curry was phenomenal. He had a really good year. He was the only bright spot on what I thought would be, perhaps up and coming. It turns out Eddie got worse, and the team never developed, and Isaiah proved to be the worst coach in the history of basketball. But nonetheless, Jerome James, Eddie Curry, not only traded for Eddie Curry, but gave him a big money extension. Just Isaiah Thomas, the Anika Braun-Saunders case where she sued and got, they settled for $11 million, and who really knows what happens there. But just the way he acts, and you can kind of tell with Isaiah's smile and reputation. I mean, there's a reason that people don't want him around. He wasn't wanted on the Dream Team. And, I actually would love to do a podcast on that because I've read several books on the Dream Team, and it's quite the stories. But the one synonymous thing is that, yes, it's true. Mike didn't want Isaiah on the team, but he wasn't the only one. It wasn't just Mike. I'm sure Mike was the only voice that mattered, but he ain't the only one. Isaiah Thomas rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and simply put, one of the worst. I can't say worst general managers because he did draft some talent. David Lee had a fantastic career. Channing Frye is still kicking around, as far as I know. Wilson Chandler plays for the Nets. Ariza's, I'm blanking on where he is right now. Portland, I believe he's in Portland. So listen, some talent out there. Tracy McGrady, if not for injury, Stoudemire, if not for injury. Marcus Camby went on to have some great success for the Knicks years later. So as a general manager, though, not good. That's for sure. Not good. And just one big disaster. Isaiah Thomas from 2003. So from 99 to 2008, we had Scott Layden and Isaiah Thomas. A lot went on from 99 to 2008. I went from, I turned 21 in 90, I can't do math. In 99, I turned 21 in 99, I guess. Yes, that would be the math. I turned 21 that year. So by the time I turned 29 or 30, whatever the math equal out to, is when that regime ended. And it was mercifully because it was hard to watch. Then, the best hire, as far as a GM goes, from the outside, bringing in Donnie Walsh. Donnie Walsh, a proven guy with the Pacers, built some of those Pacers teams we matched up against, those Dale Davis and Antonio Davis, Rick Smits teams. Maybe Dale Davis, one of my favorite players ever. And Rick Smits, the guy that just, I don't know if he only killed Ewing, but man, he used to give Ewing the business. I mean, Ewing would give it to him back on the other end, but whether it was Ewing or anybody else, Rick Smits killed the Knicks. Great player. Dunking Dutchman, fantastic. Anybody wants to go back and do your history, go watch the Knicks Pacers game from back in the day. You want to see pretty basketball? No, but I remember the Pacers just grimy Hayward Workman and a 57-year-old Byron Scott and Derek McKee. It's just and Larry Brown was the coach, and Larry Bird was the coach, and they had Isaiah Thomas was the coach, and all those teams, not so much the Isaiah Thomas teams, because they didn't really match up with the Knicks as far as playoffs go, but there was some battles. There was some great basketball games, some really great basketball. So Donnie Walsh comes over, and he brings credibility. He brings he does what he does. He built the team up. He waited patiently. He fixed the salary cap. The salary cap was a disaster. We were paying Shandon Anderson and Willie Anderson and every other Anderson and a bunch of, and the guys from the Isley and Weatherspoon, and we were paying these guys all this freaking money to not play basketball very well. So Donnie Walsh came in, fixed the salary cap. Then we got all the salary cap space was obviously an attempt at that time to get LeBron James. Didn't work out that way. LeBron decided to take his talents to South Beach, and that went that way. But he did bring in Amari Stoudemire, who was probably the third best. I think Dwayne Wade was a free agent that year as well. I'm drawing a blank, actually. There was one of the top elite star. It might have been D Wade. And then LeBron was probably Stoudemire probably the third or fourth best free agent available. We did sign him. And Amari Stoudemire produced immediately. Team won games. A lot of good things happened under Amari Stoudemire. The cap space, Amari went back to the playoffs with Amari Stoudemire-led team. He was an MVP. I wouldn't say an MVP, a legitimate MVP candidate. He didn't win enough games. But he was playing at an MVP level. Let me tell you, it was phenomenal to watch. He was still, he was not quite the young Amari. Again, you want to watch film. You want to treat yourself, go watch some Steve Nash, Amari Stoudemire, Phoenix Suns with Mike D'Antoni, and Joe Johnson, and, you want to see some up and down basketball. And, Stockton, Malone were famous for the pick and roll. It's Amari Stoudemire and Steve Nash. It was more like the slip and roll or the not even pick and roll. They would barely set screens. They just had an amazing chemistry. It was really fun to watch. So if you wanted to watch, you could go look at, Amari Stoudemire pre-Knicks. Because even on the Knicks, though, great play, averaged 20-something plus a game his first year. Then year two, the team was playing extremely well at the trading deadline and made the move for Carmelo Anthony. Now, for Donnie Walsh, all reports say this wasn't Donnie Walsh's decision. And it's disappointing. This is when, because from all reports that I've read, and that's a lot of reports, Dolan did not get involved with Layden and did not get involved with Isaiah Thomas. Like, they were in charge, and he kind of stayed away because that's he took a lot of crap for that. I should say with Isaiah Thomas, not so much with Layden. I don't know what happened, but Isaiah was in charge of making the moves anyway. And with Walsh, he publicly said he wouldn't get involved in decisions, but he lied. That's what rich spoiled punks do. They lie. Again, not a punk. Wrong word to use. Rich, whiny little better? I don't know. Not appropriate, not nice, but it's how I feel. I can't control it. The guy's a clown. Just that little spoiled rich kid who don't know nothing, who's in charge. Part of that 1%, people like to say. It's just no like for the man. Donnie Walsh, great man, great basketball man. Forged relationships in this game that'll last forever. Likely, I would imagine, is in the Hall of Fame. I don't have it in front of me, but if he's in the Hall of Fame, God bless. If not as an executive, I think he belongs. That's for sure. He was. The one thing, let's cover the Carmelo Anthony trade real quick, just in case we don't ever do a Carmelo Anthony podcast. But all these people who say, well, the Knicks are away from become a free agent because they would have got him anyway. No, not accurate. The Nets had, if you remember back then, the Nets had a trade in line for Carmelo Anthony. The Nets had, the pieces agreed upon together. Eventually, a similar package that eventually went for Deron Williams. Carmelo did not want to go to the Nets. Carmelo wouldn't want to go to the Knicks. God, you think about it now, like what a poor decision. Remember, this is Jersey Nets, though. Carmelo wasn't denying Brooklyn. He was denying New Jersey. So the trade, if Carmelo Anthony didn't go to the Knicks, they would go and trade him to the Nets. Because while Carmelo Anthony did not want to go to the Nets, he wanted to make sure he got his extension. Because I'm not going to spend 20 minutes explaining rules, but you can re-sign your own free agent to a certain amount of money, extension, as much as 5 years. If you re-sign a free agent that's not your own, you can only give him 4 years. So that extra year is an extra $20 to $30 million, whatever the math was at the time. And Carmelo Anthony wanted that money, and the only way to get it was to do it with Brooklyn, with the team that traded for him. It ended up happening with him with the Knicks. He ended up getting his money from the Knicks instead. But, let's be clear. If the Knicks didn't pull off this trade, people like they traded too much. No, not really. Gallinari is a good player. But nothing else truly panned. And the Nuggets got a good point guard in Murray, I suppose, and, things like that. But it wasn't this mind-blowing thing. We also got a guy who was an MVP candidate, last time we were any good, 54. I brought it up a few times just because there's nothing else positive to bring up. There's nothing else good over the last few years. So I choose to remember the one freaking pile. People are like, would you rather make the playoffs and lose in the first? Yes. 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 Damn the F-bomb again. Hell yeah, I want to go to playoffs and lose in the first round. I just want to go to the playoffs, man. It's the New York freaking Knicks. I miss it. There is nothing like the Garden when it's rocking. I went to that Ranger game I told you. New Dope guys. Shout out Richie Rusarito, Patty Hopkins, the homie Bobcat. I went and I felt the energy. And by the way, the Rangers stink. And they're like out of the playoff hunt. They were like on the outskirts, could have fought their way back into it or whatever. I don't know anything about hockey. My favorite hockey player is Esa Tikkanen. That's about all I know. But the energy in the building was ridiculous. They were playing the best team in hockey. They lost. The Blues, I think they were. They lost, but I had a phenomenal time. But that's the energy. That's just a regular season game at the Garden. Playoff hockey, never been. Now I'm going to cross it off the list too at some point. But I've been to Knicks playoff games. Not as a youth, not in the 90s. It was too, didn't have money, but I went, during this Amari Stoudemire, Carmelo Anthony run, and it was a lot of fun. Just had a great time. I've gotten off track a little bit, but sometimes you start thinking about things and you reminisce. And then I guess on a podcast, there's no set format, and it's my podcast, so I can get off track whenever I feel like it. But getting back, because I do want to wrap this up, Donnie Walsh, great man, had no choice. Again, the trade was forced on him. He had to trade a lot of the roster in order to acquire Carmelo Anthony. That lack of depth ended up hurting the team as far as making the playoffs that year. Also, I remember Amari Stoudemire punched a fire extinguisher, breaking his hand. That certainly didn't help anything. But the bottom line is that great job by Donnie Walsh, but unfortunately he was forced to do things that weren't, he was forced to make decisions that weren't necessarily his. Unfortunate, but that's a screaming indictment of Dolan. A screaming indictment of a spoiled, rich child who has no business owning a sports team. I should say no business owning a sports team. Has no business owning the New York Knicks. Do you know what the most valuable team in the NBA is? The Knicks. I've given you all this. We've talked about stats, how bad the team has been. Sometimes they don't even play hard over the years. The number one team by far, by the way, and by far, is the Knicks. If Dolan were to sell the Knicks, he would get several billion. Several. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm not in the market for the Knicks. I don't know the numbers, but several billion. If you told me 10 billion, it wouldn't shock me. Billion. And we've sucked. We've sucked. We've unequivocally, undeniably, absolutely sucked in every aspect. We've even sucked with luck. We've sucked with the lottery. When some of the boys went to Top Golf, which I love, to watch the NBA draft lottery, and it's just like getting the wind sucked out of you, Just that was we did what we had to do. We lost enough games. We had the most ping pong balls, but didn't pan out for us. Anyway, moving on. I guess I'm expanding so much because Donnie Walsh, I feel bad for the guy. Did a good job running the Knicks. Donnie Walsh did not work out. Then we moved on. And you moved on to Glenn Grunwald. Now, most people won't know Glenn Grunwald. If I asked most people, even people that watch basketball, they probably wouldn't know who it was. But he was the general manager of the Knicks for 2 years and quietly had 2 winning seasons. 2 years, 2 winning seasons. He was the general manager of the Carmelo Anthony team, the one that eventually won 54 games. He was, listen, he didn't try and rape anybody. He didn't get any lawsuits against him. He didn't sign anybody to any awful contracts. He didn't do anything stupid to get in the press. So, hey, 2 successful seasons. I mean, I haven't, maybe I should have read more about this further. That resume alone, 2 winning seasons, didn't sign any bad contracts, didn't do anything stupid. That makes him top 5 GMs, period. Different things that can get you in trouble. Not shining bad players. Just guy had a really good tenure, a strong tenure as GM. And, it's unfortunate that they decided to move on from him. Unfortunate, and it certainly doesn't make much sense, that's for sure. But from 2011 to 2013, it was Grunwald. And then came the human torpedo. The man who we don't know what the relationship is between Dolan and him, because clearly it has to be something of epic proportions for him to be around as long as he was. And that's Steve Mills. Steve Mills. either as president or general manager, his record over this time span was 178 and 365. 365 losses. The man has a loss for every day of the calendar. I'm going to call it during his reign of stupidity. He was brought on to replace Grunwald for no apparent reason whatsoever. Had zero personality. Didn't talk to the media. Didn't seem to have any knowledge as far as insights or connections, or clearly didn't have the ability to draw free agents, as guys like Durant wouldn't even consider us during the Steve Mills era. Hard to describe how bad this man's been. He made Isaiah Thomas look intelligent, at least. He made Isaiah Thomas look smart from time to time. Not from a basketball perspective. As far as human being goes, I mean, Steve Mills never got any trouble or did anything outside of making poor basketball decisions. So at least he's probably a better human being than Isaiah Thomas, or a better citizen. But just a really, really bad hire. It didn't make any sense. You want to tell me he got kept that job for 6 years? 178, 365. We fired Don Nelson, who was 9 games over 500. Got rid of Mike Woodson, 30 games over 500. Steve Mills, stay on. Makes no sense, man. And again, we're talking about all these different names and players. We talked about Patrick Ewing and Charles Oakley and Allen Houston and Latrell Sprewell, and and right up until now, with the current cast of Knicks characters, and I don't know who the backbone is. It Mitchell Robinson? Is it Barrett? I don't know. Is Julius Randle part of it? I don't know. Honestly, I'm not gonna. No, not going into this year's team, because I'll probably want to do that at a future point. I will say Barrett. I don't know, to be determined. Mitchell Robinson has a lot of upside. He probably would be the one. I would keep Mitchell Robinson over anyone, to be honest. Even Barrett, if I had to, start a team from scratch. I think I have to revisit that thought before I said it, but actually I just did, so I can't revisit it. But top of my head, I'd probably keep Robinson. He's built for this modern game now. He's built for the way the game's played. That running, dunking, can switch ball screen. Big men, can get out and play some perimeter defense. Most importantly, can get at the rim, attack. The Rockets had a lot of success running that type of offense with just rim runners in the middle and the guard. And the Rockets have gone even smaller, and they've gotten away from that. When they did it with Capella for the previous years, that was the beginning of the new modern NBA big man as far as the slip and dunk guy. It could have been great at it. But nonetheless, there's no words for Steve Mills. He was fired recently, and it was one of the best days in Knicks history. Well, one of the best decisions in Knicks history, I should say. And he did everything from president to general manager. He moved over for Phil. So here it is, 2014, 1 year into the Steve Mills regime. Now we decide we're going to bring in Big Chief Triangle. Now, anyone who knows me knows I was a gigantic fan. I thought it was a huge move. I was all about it. I was all about the triangle. I was all about everything. But I always thought, in my heart of hearts, he'd coach the team. I always thought he'd pull what Pat Riley pulled on Stan Van Gundy. Benedict Riley. If you don't know this story, I'll tell that one really quick. This piece of garbage. Miami Heat signed LeBron James and Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, the big three. They do all this crazy stuff. Stan Van Gundy coached the team for a little while. Gets about the All-Star break. Stan Van Gundy gets fired. Riley comes down from the front office to take over. And it was successful, mind you. Now, the Knicks were terrible. And I just hoped or assumed that eventually, I know he was older and he had health issues, but eventually Phil would take over and just coach the team. Instead, it just never happened. He brought in Fisher. He brought in his own guy. Fisher was terrible. And after Fisher, I just thought he would move on. But no, he went, move into the coaching role. But instead, and run his triangle offense and do it his way. But he never did that. He never even moved to New York. He didn't even live there. It didn't really make any sense. He was never seemed engaged. We signed Joakim Noah and Courtney Lee, these big-time deals. Like, we signed guys to go for it. Go for what? Go for the playoffs? It just wasn't. And again, I know earlier I said make the playoffs, But just you don't add limited guys with limited skills like Noah. Like Noah, at the time I was mixed reviews. We were signing a 32-year-old and a New Yorker and all that, and I loved him defensively, and I'm happy we signed Joakim Noah. I was happy he came to the Knicks, but not for the 5 years he got, not for the money we paid him, and what ended up being a buyout. And I think we used a stretch provision on his contract. But Phil Jackson, man, from what we're told, he wasn't interfered with by Dolan. It was all him, just being indifferent, and he really just didn't seem to give a shit, Phil. That would be my, you were a great player for the organization before my time, but, on the championship team, and, I don't care what you say, wins and losses. I mean, the man has 11 rings. You have Michael Jordan, you got Kobe. I don't care. The teams with the best players don't always win. With Phil, they usually did. With Phil, when he had the best players, his teams won, bottom line, 11 times. So, as far as a coach goes, he's great. But as far as the general manager goes, his role at the Knicks, horrible, pathetic, terrible. Why don't you take your pipe and go smoke into Montana somewhere and never come back? Go into the trees, go hug the trees, go smoke the trees. Whatever it is you do, Big Chief Triangle, because I was wrong about you. You sucked, and you are not missed. Now, currently, Scott Perry is the general manager. He's survived the purge with Leon Rose so far. Listen, I don't know much. I can't say anything negative about him because we haven't been in a position to really do anything the last two off seasons as far as cap wise. Well, this year we had cap money, but after the big free agents were gone, there wasn't much we can do, and we don't know the power structure. I don't know how much did Steve Mills in charge? Was he in charge? It was very hard to figure out. So I'm kind of giving Perry a pass, calling him to be determined. They've drafted well with Perry in the office. Can't say he's done a bad job. The team also isn't thriving, and no free agents of note. So I don't know about Perry. So we'll see. He so far survived the Leon Rose purge, so that's good. And the last thing will be Leon Rose. Keep it quick. I don't know the man. From what I've read, it sounds great. The GM, the agent becoming GM. Listen, worked in Los Angeles, worked in Golden State. So it's something that can be done. Show me, Leon. I'm more than willing to sign up and be a Leon Rose guy, no problem. I just got to see it. That's the only requirement as a Knicks fan that I would ever have is that, just bring the passion back, man. Bring the talent, but bring the passion. Just put some freaking talent on that court with a coach that knows what he's doing and let them do their jobs. Wise man, once said, just, you hire people to do jobs and you just trust them and we just need trust in New York again. I just say again, I'm not sure it was ever here. Just continuity, man. Just where it all works. Where the people in the front office are in line with the head coach and the general manager and the owner, and it's all just working. And hey, Leon, I don't know how involved Dolan really is going to be. I'm calling you Leon like we're friends. Just keep him away, keep him at bay, do it your way. It was done on purpose. Hey, look at that. If Scott Perry's going to be, if you're going to keep him around, let Scott Perry be Scott Perry. Let's build an organization with the trust. Let's not keep people around for no reason. Don't know much about Leon Rose, but hey, I can say this, my fingers are crossed. My fingers are crossed, and certainly rooting for Leon Rose to be able to do a fantastic job with the organization. So that's it as far as we've now gone through all of the general managers and all of the coaches. So covered all the coaches, the organization top to bottom here. We've gone over the entire mess that has been the regime of Dolan, all these different people, all these different bodies, the different beefs. We brought up Marv Albert. We brought up Larry Brown, Woody Allen. I remember he had a famous spat with Woody Allen. I guess a lot of these celebrities do free promotions, like for free tickets, things like that. Woody Allen refused, and he was banned from the Garden. Dolan barred him from the VIP lounge. Dolan barred him from the gathering, from a Garden of Dreams Foundation gathering. Just not a very good person. Then there's another one. There's a guy named Irving Bierman in 2015. I'm going to read it verbatim because this is just insane if you think about it. Dolan responded via email to a critical letter from Bierman demanding he sell the team by telling the then 73-year-old fan to root for the Nets because the Knicks don't want you. He also referred to the Brooklyn native as a sad person and an alcoholic. Maybe. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver did not fine Dolan for the exchange, telling the Post that Jim got an unkind email and responded with an unkind email. Well, I don't know what Adam Silver is doing, but Dolan, what the is wrong with you? Damn the F word. What are you doing? Why are you responding to emails like this? Why are you... Now, listen, I don't know, this guy Irving, he may have came out of pocket and said more things. I didn't read the email. So if he got out of line, you wanted to, fine. But an alcoholic? Aren't you a recovering alcoholic? Why would you wish that upon somebody? And even if they were being rude towards you, you're going to wish that? It's an odd thing to choose. An odd choice of words for somebody who is a recovering alcoholic yourself and in charge of an organization. I don't know. Like, you're responding to fan emails? Maybe it's probably why you think that Dave the Bush is going to be our savior, because you're responding to the fans' emails. Like, I can ignore dumb comments on Facebook. You can damn sure ignore emails from random freaking fans. Ugh. Anyway, Charles Oakley, famous a couple years ago. Charles Oakley, a Knick icon, someone loved by Knick fans worldwide. Charles Oakley thrown out of the Madison Square Garden. It was quite the scene. Quite the scene. Had Charles Oakley physically removed by several security guards from his courtside seat. I don't know if we'll ever get the full story as far as what exactly happened that day. And I'm not going to bother trying to get into it. And Oak may have been wrong. I'm sure Oak's not the easy. Oak's a really angry old dude. Just complains about everything. There's a reason he couldn't stay in coaching, and he's not in broadcasting. He's angry. He's old. And comments about Ewing recently, talking about how Patrick wasn't fun to play with or whatever. Patrick Carriage is sorry ass in many ways. You offensively limited guy who couldn't catch the ball. Great rebounder. The guy that originated batting, I shouldn't say originated, but in my lifetime anyway, batting the rebounds out to shooters, things like that. Oak, Knicks captain, great Nick, has no business being thrown out of the Garden like that. It's just an embarrassing situation for all involved. But not for Dolan, because he can't be embarrassed. Who can't be embarrassed? Rich people. People that think they're above the law. People that think that it doesn't matter what happens to them. That's what he is, and he's been that his whole life. It's different when you come into money or you earn money or make money on your own. Or even if you get a nest egg from somebody and it gives you a good start, but from there you double and quadruple and move on and do things for your own investments. But no, he never had to do anything on his own. He was handed everything by his daddy. And he gets to throw Charles Oakley out of basketball games. Like I said before, he threw that one fan in the video. He's, do you want to go to more games? Well, good, because now you're banned from the Garden. And he banned the guy from Madison Square Garden. He once told a kid, a teenager, was removed from his seat and detained by security for 15 minutes during a loss to Memphis on January 29th because he took part in a Sell the Knicks chant. He pointed the kid out, and security came and physically removed him. You big, dumb, rich bully. Where's Kanye? You bully! You punk-ass, oversized bully. I mean, one thing, you went and remove people yourself, that'd be great. And listen, if you're the owner and was throwing people out by hands, doing the Uncle Phil to Jazz, that'd be fantastic. I'd watch that day of the week. But no, you have your security guard henchman do it. You are a punk. You're a real punk, and you're destroying. I shouldn't say destroying. You have destroyed the heart and soul of the New York Knicks. We are begging you to sell. Sell. Give them to somebody else. Give them to one of your brothers or sisters. Give them to your cousins. Give it to your stepfather. Give it to your janitor. Just do anything. Just get away, man. The reason we want him to go away is the most recent incident, Spike Lee. The most recent incident of the madness that is the life of Jimmy Dolan, the life of James Dolan, the life of Mr. freaking Dolan. Listen, I've been told people on the inside there that Spike's full of shit. He was told to stop using that exit 1 million times. Okay, I get it. Like, Spike's lying as far as that part of it goes. And I believe that because I'm not the biggest Spike Lee fan as a person, but I'm a Knicks fan. And Spike Lee has been going to Knicks games all of my adult life. He has spent literally millions of dollars on season tickets. He gives them several $100,000 a year just from his seats alone. It's impossible to describe how someone could be, and the Reggie Miller instance, flying to Indiana, sit in front row there, always representing the team. Like, listen, man, like Spike Lee in many ways is the representative of Knicks fans. And while I'm not the biggest fan of Spike Lee in general, he's he's the Knicks. He represents the fans. I don't want to say us because again, I don't want to represent me, but for other reasons and unrelated to basketball. But I just don't understand how Dolan could make an issue of this. Like, yes, it's Spike breaking the rule. Okay. He's Spike freaking Lee. He should be allowed to walk in butt naked with a team full of 12 people with him, chugging Bud Lights and doing cake stands if he feels like it. He's Spike Lee. He shouldn't need a ticket. He shouldn't pay anything. He's earned his rights. He's a fan through and through, stays 4 quarters, watches all the games. I don't know. At this moment, it became more despair. Like, this is the reason the podcast exists is Spike Lee. Not the Spike Lee, obviously, but the incident. This was the reason I said, you know what? That's my first podcast. That's the first. I'm going to figure out how to use a laptop, and I am not technologically savvy. But I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to buy a microphone. I'm going to figure out how to use GarageBand. And you know what? If you listen to this, I did it with a lot of help from a lot of different people. But I did it. And I did it just to yell and complain or bitch about Spike Lee and Jim Dolan. I did it to complain about Jim Dolan and Phil Jackson, about Jim Dolan and Donnie Walsh, and everything else I bitched and complained about for the last hour, going on about an hour and a half. Jimmy, you can't kick Spike Lee out of the building. I mean, obviously you can. Well, not kick out. That's not quite what happened. But you can't do that. It's just not, you're losing us. You've lost us. Granted, if the team somehow wins, great, but it'll be despite you, not because of you. I wanted to bring up 2 more things. We're going to wrap this up. Wrap up the first ever Unforced Turnovers Podcast. I'm very proud to say that. There's a story that back during some of the better years, after losses, I should say after losses, after wins or losses, that Dolan would play his guitar on the team plane. And this is back, in a time where, I shouldn't say a time, but these guys care nowadays too, but, after losses, team planes were sad or not happy or people in bad moods. And Dolan would sit there and play his guitar even after losses. Many people have been quoted as saying the looks on the players' faces were just priceless. Impossible to comprehend. This fat, ugly, oversized, munchkin-looking dude. That's a good one, oversized munchkin. He looks like a small face with a fat face, It's mind-blowing that he would do something like that. Playing your guitar and singing, I don't know if he sings or it only says play guitar for what I've read, but on a plane with a bunch of pissed off people. It doesn't really bother you. But that'll get to another point of not really bothering you. Here's another terrible quote from James Dolan. It'll be the last quote and the last thing that I had planned prior to this, and I'll just close up with a few remarks about James. This is why he is what he is. This is why he doesn't care. And it's sad. But I'm going to read this verbatim. He was doing an interview with Michael Kay. Michael Kay is a famous broadcaster in New York. And during the interview, it alluded to that when he looks around the arena and sees thousands of people, his quote, now this is a quote directly, "Take a look at our record and take a look at our attendance," he told Michael Kay. "The results don't matter. Win or lose, we're going to make roughly the same amount of money." It's impossible to even comprehend how dumb that is. Let's go over the many ways which that's not accurate. 1, if you make the playoffs and have playoff games, you have 20,000 people more entering your arena and people buying shirts and tickets and all types of stuff and apparel and merchandise and all that stuff. So when you're good, you make more money, jackass. You probably wouldn't know because you've been holding this team hostage for 20 freaking years. But if you do that, if you make the playoffs, good things happen. Okay, secondly, no, jackass, the time has come Because you have found a way to drive the fans out. Went to a game not too long ago. I looked up. What I used to call the blue seats were empty. It's been reported for the first time in a long time, Knicks games are undersold. You can go see a Knicks play right now for $30, 200 level seat. I once paid, I don't want to admit how much I once paid for a playoff ticket, but it was a lot, an awful lot. No, the money won't be the same anymore, James, because we're not showing up anymore. We can't put up with you. We can't put up with whatever it is you think you stand for. We can't put up with your childish antics. We can't put up with your stupid face anymore. We can't put up with you being a spoiled rich bitch. We can't deal with any of this shit anymore, James. It's time to go. It's time to give the beloved New York Knicks back to the city of New York. I don't care if you sell it to a realtor from Boston. We'll learn to adjust. But just give us somebody who's a remotely normal human being. Give us somebody who cares about New York City basketball, who cares about our rich traditions, and just who cares, period. You've had your run. What you said is wrong, sir. You're going to start to lose a bit of money. You know what? I know. You make so much freaking money that if you lose 40 or 50 or $100 million in the Knicks, it's a drop in the bucket to you. Just let them go, man. You don't seem to give a shit. You throw fans away. You just, why? Why are you holding on ruthlessly? You can make such a profit from a financial standpoint. You put the Knicks on the open market, you'll get billions. You can go probably buy anything you want with your wildest imaginations and your stupid, stupid imaginations. And with that, we'll wrap up the first ever Unforced Turnovers podcast. On behalf of Wu-Tang, I want to thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed and hope you'll enjoy subsequent episodes in the future. Looking forward to getting a variety of stuff out there. Like I said, mostly stuff just to enjoy, laugh, have fun, hopefully talk about, hopefully you enjoyed. Listen to future broadcasts. On behalf of myself, Wu-Tang, Jim Dolan, the New York Knicks, and everybody else I complained about today, you guys have a great day. Have a good night. We'll talk soon. I'll leave you on an outro with another Zudu banger. Have a good one, folks.
Big Rob, it's the B-A-G, the E-L-S. Now I like the flex, cause I got them pecs. And record execs still ain't even trying to sign our checks. We rapping like the Yankees, but they comparing us to the Mets. And it's a damn shame, cause the flow is continuous like the cane in the crackhead vein. Just remember my name, you a bust like Rondane. Got more pros in the game than the Miami Hurricanes. And it's about my main that you ain't on my level. Turn up your bass and equal out your treble. Never mellow, but always a smooth fellow. Ballin' from New York to Denver like my name is Carmelo. We all about the Nuggets, sticky green, we love it. Put a 4-5 on your chest like your name was TJ Duckett. It's big ROB reppin' the ZUD. To the day I kick and bucket.